The romantic image of a lone cowboy hunched over a campfire with nothing but beans and black coffee captures only part of the story. In truth, the Chuckwagon era revealed a surprisingly resourceful food system that sustained grueling cattle drives, where the cook's ingenuity turned basic staples into meals that kept up to 18 hard-working men fueled and surprisingly content. Far from monotonous drudgery, this mobile kitchen represented a critical logistical triumph, balancing portability, nutrition, and morale in an unforgiving environment. The Chuckwagon itself, a southern term, while northern plains outfits like those in the Dakota prairies called it the mess wagon, served as the rolling heart of the operation. The cook, often called Cookie, wielded outsized influence. Even the toughest trail boss deferred to him, since a disgruntled cook could doom the crew's energy and spirits. Cowboys openly courted his favor for extra helpings, underscoring how food became a currency of power and survival. Cookie stocked the wagon with durable essentials. Dried beans, especially pinto, the trail favorite, per True West accounts, though kidney and white varieties appeared too, cured meats like salt pork or bacon, coffee, lard, potatoes, flour for biscuits, and occasional dried fruit. Fresh beef came straight from the herd when needed, and opportunistic hunting or foraging added variety. The Dutch oven reigned supreme as the go-to tool, enabling versatile campfire cooking from stews to breads. Beans dominated because they were lightweight, portable, and protein-packed, perfect for soaking all day in the wagon before a quick evening preparation. Their long shelf life made them ideal, yet the lack of refrigeration forced cooks to serve them immediately after cooking to avoid spoilage. A common myth paints cowboy beans as bland and unchanging. In reality, Cookie often spiked them with chili peppers for heat and flavor, or stretched them further by mixing in rice and red chili, a practical tactic to feed large, ravenous crews efficiently. Hard biscuits, nicknamed Hot Rocks for their rock-hard, moisture-free bake that ensured longevity, were another staple, tough enough to last but filling when paired with gravy or beans. Coffee, brewed strong enough to float a horseshoe, provided the essential jolt, often the first thing ready at dawn. Ultimately, the Chuckwagon diet wasn't luxury, but it was far from grim survival fare. Through clever use of preserved goods, fresh beef access, and bold seasoning, the cook transformed necessity into something that kept cowboys riding strong, proving that even on the dusty trail, a good meal could make the difference between endurance and exhaustion. When you strip away the myths of endless steak feasts, the cowboy diet reveals a stark truth. Survival hinged on preserved, portable foods that could endure weeks without spoilage. Yet the Chuckwagon cook still managed to inject enough variety and ingenuity to keep morale from collapsing under the grind of the trail. Hard biscuits, dried fruit, salted pork, and jerky weren't mere rations. They were calculated solutions to the brutal logistics of feeding a mobile workforce far from any supply line, where a single poor meal could erode a crew's will to ride. Hot Rocks, those infamous rock-hard biscuits, were born of ruthless necessity. Made from just flour, water, and salt, they were baked and rebaked until every trace of moisture vanished, transforming them into near-indestructible hardtack. This same ultra-dry bread sustained Civil War soldiers, proving its grim reliability across eras. While they lasted for months without molding, their taste bordered on punishment. Cowboys softened them in coffee, water, or rare milk to make them chewable. The myth that hardtack was merely tough but tasty when fresh is nonsense. Freshness was never the point. Longevity was. Dried fruit offered the rare flash of sweetness in an otherwise savory world. Apples, peaches, apricots, or raisins were sun-dried on cheesecloth until shrunken and leathery, a frontier preservation method as old as settlement itself. The cook stewed them at dawn to brighten breakfast or served them as a simple evening dessert. With added sugar or a soak beforehand, they even became pie-filling. In a diet heavy on beans, meat, and bread, this small luxury combated monotony and supplied vital micronutrients when fresh produce was a distant memory. Meat anchored the menu, but freshness was a luxury few enjoyed. Salt pork, derisively called sow belly, and bacon dominated because pigs were easy to raise in bulk, and salting preserved them reliably in the pre-refrigeration age. The technique was ancient, layers of pork buried in salt to draw out moisture, or packed in barrels and submerged in brine, as described in 1846 cookbooks. Cowboys carried these fatty, salty cuts as reliable fuel, energy-dense and resistant to spoilage during long drives. Beef, when taken from the herd, often became jerky, the trail's most celebrated portable protein. Smoked and sun-dried with salt, wind, and sometimes spices, jerky could last months, far outpacing fresh cuts. Cowboys chewed it on the move, or tossed it into stews for added depth. Far from a cowboy invention, jerky's roots stretch back centuries across cultures. Its dominance in the late 1800s, West simply reflected timeless practicality in a hot, dusty environment hostile to fresh meat. The Chuckwagon's genius lay not in gourmet ambition, but in ruthless efficiency. Every item, hard biscuits, dried fruit, salted pork, jerky, was chosen for endurance, then cleverly repurposed by a skilled cookie to deliver flavor, nutrition, and enough variety to sustain men through exhaustion. In the end, these weren't delicacies. They were weapons against hunger and despair on a landscape that offered neither mercy nor second chances. When you peel back the layers of cowboy myth, what emerges is a diet engineered for maximum endurance under extreme conditions, where every calorie had to pull double duty as fuel, morale booster, and portable survival kit. The real story isn't endless feasts, but clever adaptations. Ultra-dry hardtack, nutrient-dense pemmican traded from native allies, brutally strong coffee as liquid adrenaline, and the obsessive care lavished on a living sourdough starter that turned basic flour into something cowboys actually preferred. The cowboy version of hardtack pushed the concept to its limit, drier, more brittle, and aggressively salty compared to military rations. This extreme dehydration made it virtually indestructible on long drives, but it also amplified the salt punch, turning each bite into a test of willpower. Cowboys softened it in coffee or stew when possible, yet the texture and flavor were secondary to its ability to outlast mold, bugs, and time. A far more palatable trail food came through cultural exchange: pemmican. Native Americans had perfected this high-energy bar for centuries: dried venison or bison pounded with fat, mixed with nuts, dried berries, and sometimes herbs, creating a compact, nutrient-rich food that resisted spoilage indefinitely. Cowboys eagerly traded for it during encounters with indigenous groups, valuing its portability and taste. The widespread image of cowboys as isolated loners ignores this vital cross-cultural food link. Pemmican wasn't just borrowed, it became a sought-after commodity that bridged worlds on the frontier. Coffee wasn't a morning ritual, it was oxygen for men facing 18-hour days in the saddle. Forget creamy lattes. Cowboys demanded jet-black, scalding brew that hit like a kick. Arbuckles ruled the Southwest Trail, not just for its robust flavor, but for the built-in incentives. Every sack included premium coupons and, crucially, a peppermint stick. The man who ground the beans claimed the candy, a tiny luxury that sparked fierce competition and made the chore bearable. Cooks maximized caffeine by layering fresh grounds over yesterdays, boiling relentlessly. Western lore captured the desired strength perfectly. 2 pounds of arbuckles, wet down, boiled 2 hours, then test with a horseshoe. If it sinks, keep going. That wasn't exaggeration, it was necessity. No chuckwagon tool mattered more than the sourdough starter, the cook's living temperamental partner. Before commercial yeast existed, wild fermentation delivered the tangy, chewy biscuits Cowboys favored over bland baking powder versions, a preference confirmed by food historians and cowboy scholars alike. Each evening, while the crew swapped stories, Cookie tended his starter like a child, feeding it flour and water, guarding it from contamination, using clean jars and filtered water to nurture the right yeast and bacteria. The process began with all-purpose wheat flour and water, then daily refreshments to keep the culture vigorous. That tangy flavor wasn't incidental. It signaled a healthy starter that could reliably leaven bread in the wilderness. In the end, these elements, brutal hardtack, traded pemmican, rocket fuel coffee, and pampered sourdough, weren't random. They formed a deliberate system that sustained human horsepower across hundreds of miles of unforgiving land. The Chuckwagon didn't just feed cowboys, it kept them riding when every instinct screamed to quit. When the trail demanded speed and the sourdough starter needed days to rise properly, cowboys didn't wait. They turned to pan de campo, the quick, rugged flatbread that became a Chuckwagon essential. Known interchangeably as camp bread or cowboy bread, this simple unleavened round was born of necessity. Fast to mix, easy to bake in a Dutch oven over open coals, and forgiving enough for a tired cook to whip up after a brutal day. Contemporary Chuckwagon expert Kent Rollins, with 20 years of trail cooking, still champions its minimalism, proof that great trail food didn't require complexity, just reliability. The recipe was brutally straightforward: all-purpose flour, salt, lard, or whatever fat was on hand, a splash of oil, and milk when available, or water when it wasn't. Sift the flour, mix in salt, cut in the lard until crumbly, make a well for oil, then add liquid and knead just until smooth and non-sticky. Roll or pat it into a thick disc, set it in a hot Dutch oven, and bake until both sides browned with that satisfying crisp exterior and soft interior. No yeast, no proofing, no fuss, ready in under an hour. That speed made it a favorite when hunger struck and time was short. Nuts and dried fruit rounded out the portable snacks that kept energy up between meals. Pecan and almond groves produced plenty of culls, small or imperfect nuts unsuitable for export, that found their way into Chuckwagons as cheap, nutrient-packed trail food. Apples dominated the dried fruit supply, but regional variety added welcome diversity. Apricots, peaches, cherries, and others appeared depending on the drive's path. Stewed or eaten straight, they delivered sweetness and vitamins when fresh produce was a fantasy. The cowboy world was far more diverse than Hollywood ever admitted. Roughly 20 to 25% of working cowhands were black, indigenous, or Hispanic, with Mexican vaqueros, the original cattle herders hired by Spanish ranchers, laying the foundation for the entire American cowboy tradition. In South Texas especially, this heritage translated directly into the food. Tex-Mex flavors infiltrated the Chuckwagon. Pan de Campo itself is a direct descendant of Mexican flatbread traditions, still celebrated today at San Antonio Vaquero cook-offs. Cowboys savored fajitas, carne guisada, hearty beans, and especially chili con carne, a cheap-filling bowl of red that became legendary for powering men through exhaustion. Seasoned Pioneers notes its dominance as a staple: beef, chili peppers, and minimal extras stretched far and satisfied deeply. Then there was Rascal Stew, the rougher, richer cousin to ordinary beef stew. While familiar beef and vegetable versions existed, Rascal Stew carried a wilder edge, often incorporating whatever meat was on hand, sometimes less than prime cuts or game, bold spices, and a thicker, more intense broth that reflected the trail's improvisational spirit. It wasn't polite dining, it was sustenance forged from necessity, Mexican culinary influence, and sheer hunger. In the end, the Chuckwagon menu wasn't a rigid list, but a living adaptation: quick breads for speed, traded and foraged extras for variety, and bold Tex-Mex dishes for flavor. The cowboy diet succeeded because it listened to the land, the crew, and the cultures they crossed, turning survival into something that tasted, if only for a moment, like home on the move. When the trail ran long and supplies dwindled, the Chuckwagon cook's greatest virtue wasn't creativity. It was ruthless thrift. Son of a gun stew, or son of a bitch stew, depending on who was cursing around the fire, stood as the ultimate testament to that principle, a dish that wasted nothing of a freshly killed calf except hide, hooves, and horns. Far from a gourmet delicacy, it was a bold declaration that hunger trumped squeamishness, and the frontier rewarded men who could turn every scrap into sustenance. The stew's roster read like an anatomy lesson: tenderloin for texture, heart for depth, liver added with extreme care to avoid bitterness, brains for silkiness, marrow for richness, tongue for chew, sweetbreads for subtle luxury, and the gut itself. The true star, however, was the marrow gut, the still milky intestinal tube of an unweaned calf that connected the four stomachs. When simmered slowly, it released a rich, almost buttery essence that gave the stew its unmistakable, addictive character. No other ingredient could replicate it. This wasn't just food, it was frontier alchemy, transforming offal into something cowboys actually craved as a welcome break from endless beans and biscuits. The dish embodied zero-waste philosophy long before the term existed. Cooks took quiet pride in stretching one animal to feed a dozen or more ravenous men, proving resourcefulness was as vital a skill as roping or riding. A common misconception paints son-of-a-gun stew as a bizarre novelty or punishment dish. In truth, it ranked among the most anticipated meals on the trail, savory, hearty, and a rare taste of variety in a diet otherwise defined by repetition. Beyond the herd, cowboys supplemented beef with whatever the land offered because slaughtering the boss's cattle for daily meals was a quick path to unemployment. Hunting and fishing became essential skills. Buffalo, deer, and elk delivered serious meat when the opportunity arose. Wild turkey, pheasant, and other fowl provided lean protein and a change of pace. Even less conventional game, skunk, muskrat, bear, found its way into the pot when necessity demanded. Adaptability wasn't optional, it was survival. One of the most enduring frontier delicacies came straight from spring branding. Rocky Mountain oysters, the euphemistic name for bull testicles harvested during castration. Tossed aside? Never. Grilled over coals or fried, they became a crunchy, briny treat that curious or hungry cowhands devoured with relish. What modern eaters might recoil from was simply another efficient use of resources, no part left behind. Corn dodgers rounded out the portable staples. These rugged cornbread cakes, sometimes round, sometimes cut square for convenience, were cheap, long-lasting, and versatile. Made from cornmeal, flour, salt, and fat, or water, they baked hard enough to survive saddlebags, yet softened nicely in stew or coffee. Their fame even reached Hollywood. In True Grit, Rooster Cogburn famously used them for target practice, cementing their place in cowboy lore as tough, no-nonsense trail food. In the end, the cowboy diet succeeded through brutal pragmatism and cultural ingenuity. Son-of-a-gun stew, wild game, cast-off delicacies like Rocky Mountain oysters, and humble corn dodgers weren't luxuries. They were proof that on the open range, the line between waste and wealth was razor-thin, and the men who crossed it best were the ones who ate best.